Now I have reviewed the 11T Pro from Xiaomi, and this is the slightly cheaper version, the 11T. This does away with the Qualcomm chipset and has the MediaTek Dimensity 1200 5G in it. My model here has 8GB of RAM, 128GB of UFS 3.1 storage, and the only other real difference to the 11T Pro is the charging speed. So instead of that blazing fast hypercharge at 120 watts, this model here has 67 watt charging, which takes about 40 minutes or just under. And this model, I have found, does have an issue that Xiaomi really does have to address ASAP. Now the build of this one, it is a heavy phone. It's 204 grams. The thickness of this one is about 8.9 millimeters, almost 9 millimeters. So it's not super slim and it's not super light either. Now the material here on the back, I did say in my 11T Pro review that it is plastic. It has a bit of a plastic feel to me. Now I haven't done a scratch test, but it could actually be glass. But the frame around the outside, this is, okay, that is definitely plastic, but inside is an alloy inner frame. So we do have this, which is our capacitive power on button with the fingerprint reader, capacitive fingerprint reader. So touching that, you see the unlock speed, always on display, that's there at the moment. Unlock speed is good, but the animation's a little tiny bit slow there. So volume up and down. On this side, we have nothing. And I'll show you the bottom. We have microphone, SIM tray tool, so it takes 2 nano SIMs, loudspeaker. There's also a loudspeaker in the earpiece. Up the top, we get an IR transmitter, and then the second loudspeaker, which is porting out the top, but also comes out the earpiece right here. So for the cameras on this one, same setup as the 11T Pro. The only difference with this one is, as I mentioned at the start, really, is the charging speed, and then of course, the chipset, which is the Dimensity 1200. So we've got a 108 megapixel camera with no optical image stabilization, rear microphone, dual tone LED flash, 5 megapixel macro, and an 8 megapixel ultra wide, which is rather disappointing. I want to see a 13 megapixel one in here at least. It's limited to just 1080p video, this camera. And then the cutout camera, this one is 16 megapixels, not the typical 20 we normally see with Xiaomi. And onto our screen, so this one is exactly the same as the 11T Pro, 120 Hz, Full HD Plus resolution, up to 1000 nits. I measure about 880. It's a good screen, very fast, fluid, and smooth. And I'll just show you the settings that we do get with this one. So I have turned on, I don't want that documents, I want settings. I have turned on the DC dimming, which it does have at 60 Hz, so it doesn't flicker on camera. Now I will show you this off. Okay, see some banding's going to come through now. So turning that on, you don't see that. So if you're sensitive to that, at least that option's there, but it is a shame that it's not at 120 Hz. So color scheme, you can adjust this, which is great. The white balance, dark mode there, reading mode, all of that, scaling, all in there. It's all up a very nice flat AMOLED 120 Hz screen. Now the ROM performance I do find is good, but what I've noticed is it's not quite as smooth as what we do have with the Snapdragon 888 version of this phone, which is slightly different. As you know, the 11T Pro has the faster charging and then that chipset. So it is good, the smoothness. What I have noticed, there's one minor bug that if you sometimes go in to select your wallpaper, for me at least, going to select it, it has completely frozen up on me. So I wouldn't say it's 100% bug-free. Now running now at 60 Hz with that DC dimming, it does not seem as smooth. But trust me, if I had it on 120 Hz with that banding that you would see, just on camera, by the way, it would seem a lot smoother. So it's a fast phone, the UFS 3.1 storage. Now I get into some of my typical things to point out here. So initially when you get it out of the box, you are going to be greeted with this. It's quite a bit of bloatware and you need to go through and clean this up. It takes only a few minutes. If you go into system, apps, uninstaller there, you can actually get rid of that very quickly. Full screen gestures do work really well too, by the way, with the ROM, no issues with triggering them. This was at the start when I had your typical normal menu keys. So we have a Widevine level 1 cert, which is very good. And of course, we do need this. So we have the proper Netflix support, full HD VP9 decoding and HDR10 capabilities there. So that is really good to see. Internal storage speeds here, They are fast, very, very fast. Okay, UFS 3.1 as mentioned. This model I have has 128 gigabytes of storage. Not a slouch at all. This will not bottleneck or hold up this ROM. It is really quick. Now, the Antutu score, this is about 80 to 90,000 points less than what I'm able to get out of the 11T Pro version. There's not really that much in it because the Snapdragon 888 on the 11T Pro seems to throttle a little bit. And as I'll show you later on, this one actually does throttle and get very hot that it will cause an error screen to come up, which I'll get onto. So here is Geekbench 5. The score is okay. Yes, the Snapdragon 888 can do better, but it's a very good score, but not compared to, say, the A14 Bionic or A15 from Apple, but excellent in the Android ecosystem. Here is Wildlife, an average of 25 frames per second, pretty standard gain, similar to performance of that of, say, a Snapdragon 865 Plus or 865 there for that one. So this is what does happen. If I put it on the stress test for 3D Mark, or I'm gaming with, say, Genshin Impact at the highest possible settings, you get this. It will eventually overheat that bad that it boots you out of applications and you cannot use Wi-Fi hotspots, GPS, or the camera until it does end up cooling down. Battery life, not really that good at 120 Hertz. So this is the fixed test I do it at 200 nits. And 10 hours may seem good for a 5,000 milliamp hour battery, but real world use, you're looking around 7 to 6.5 hours with this model so far, with my time using it. So it's not amazing. It's good, but not amazing. And it does, of course, charge in 40 minutes. Here it took 20 minutes to go from 17 to 77%, but a full charge is about 40 minutes, which is not bad. Wireless is excellent in this. Very good range, very good speeds too, when you're down a few bars of signal, and it's not the strongest, but right up close to my Wi-Fi 6 router, getting over a gigabit speeds here. That is true flagship performance. Very, very impressive. And then what else is impressive is the GPS on this. Better than Qualcomm's Snapdragon 888 GPS module on this. You can see you can get down to 1 meter of accuracy indoors. This is live. It's able to do this. Going through the roof and all that concrete, the tiles, not a problem here. I'm still getting not a bad average signal. Now, if I'm outside, it'll be in the 30s. And I do find that this GPS, for me, is more accurate and better than the Snapdragon 888 version, the 11T Pro. And then now onto our audio performance. So we do have the downward firing loudspeaker, the one in the earpiece ported out the top here. We don't have the Harman Kardon branding like we do with the 11T Pro. However, the speakers aren't that bad. They are very, very similar. They're not the loudest I've heard, but still, I think, acceptable. Now, no 3.5mm jack support with this. We expect this now with flagships. They've just done away with it completely, just like no micro SD card support. However, Bluetooth audio does still work, and you can use an adapter with this. But let's have a listen now to those speakers at 100% volume. Onto our gaming now. So this is PUBG, and we do have the 90 frames per second option here. So no support yet from the developers for 120 frames per second, which would then match the screen refresh rate. We've got this too, which is our game space I've mentioned in many of my Xiaomi reviews. So here we are able to set some do not disturbs. You can see the load there on the CPU and the GPU and the frame rate too. So I'll be keeping an eye on that, and we'll take a look now at a little bit of gameplay. So the performance, as expected, very good, 90 Hertz here, and the 8 gigabytes of RAM certainly does make things very, very smooth. Now I've got a few players here shooting at me. Someone I'm chasing down. Uh-oh. They've definitely got me, I think. Oh, got lucky there. But really good performance. You can get your kills, and it does not overheat with this particular title. But demanding games or running 3D Mark Benchmark over and over, it will eventually overheat, display that error message, and even turn off the wireless boot you out, and you cannot use the camera. So Xiaomi does need to address the overheating issues with the 11T here. Moving over to our cameras now, so this is the front-facing camera, 1080p maximum with this, 16 megapixel sensor. The electronic image stabilization is on, it's enabled, but you can see it does shake around a little bit, and it does not look as good as the 11T Pro's front-facing camera 1080p footage. I did find is a lot smoother, more steady than what we have right here. So let's move over to the rear cameras. This is the main camera, so 4K 30 frames per second with electronic image stabilization. As I pan around here, trying to keep this very steady, you will notice there are these judders, like right now, just a few coming through. Unfortunately, I see that on pretty much every single Android phone I review. They don't seem to be able to fix that. So I do have digital zoom now. This is now 2 times, okay, which still seems to be reasonably good. But once I go to about 2.5 and over, this is 3 times now, and then up to 4 times digital zoom, you can see that is just not usable. It's just like an oil painting, looks all washed out and horrible. So I'll pull that back now, and just a jog ahead now to test out that electronic image stabilization. It's not bad, but I have noticed that the 11T Pro with the Snapdragon 888 does have better stability. So the real weakness of these cameras is this, the ultra wide. Electronic image stabilization, you can see it does look reasonably stable, so that's one good thing there, but I hope that in future models they give us at least a 13 megapixel camera with 4K support. So to quickly summarize here, we've got Gorilla Glass Victus on the front, 120Hz screen, very bright. It is an AMOLED panel too. I really do like it. It's a top class, top tier screen from them. We've got dual speakers on this. They don't sound that bad. The frame around the outside, yes, it is plastic, but it has alloy in the middle. It's a very solid foam. Charges in about 40 minutes with 67 watt charging. If you need the faster, you go for the Pro model of the 11T, which of course is just 20 minutes. I do have a full review of that one up. Now the main camera does take good photos, especially in daylight, 108 megapixels with its pixel binning. You get really good results. However, it does not have any optical image stabilization. The ultra-wide's only 8 megapixels. Ultra-wide performance I find to be disappointing. The electronic image stabilization with the rear cameras seems to be reasonably good, but not quite as good as the Snapdragon 888 11T Pro model. The front-facing camera looks very washed out in its current state. Like the gamma looks off, the exposure, the saturation, and then the stability with the front-facing camera doesn't seem to be working properly there. It was shaking all over the place, so hopefully Xiaomi can address that. So my main concern with this model here is for the gamers out there. If you game for extended periods, you live in a very warm climate in summer and you're playing, say, PUBG non-stop for 2 hours with a case on this, it will probably overheat if you don't tone down on the visuals or the frame rate. If you run it at 90 frames per second and on the HD setting there, it will take a long time to trigger that. But a really demanding game like Genshin Impact or simply running 3D Mark Benchmark, the stress test, it will not be able to complete it. It overheats, kicks you out of the application, and throws that error message that I showed you in this video. So that needs to be addressed from Xiaomi. And if they can do that, this is a solid offering, slightly cheaper than the 11T Pro, but still the Xiaomi 11 is a very good phone, and it has been selling for, well, not really that much more when it's on sale here locally in Spain for a very decent price, and I would also consider that model. So thank you so much for watching my review and thoughts here on the Xiaomi 11T.